Buying a property can feel like a high-pressure game, especially when you're told that there's another buyer circling around right after you've made an offer. But is this real competition or just an agent's trick to make you move faster?
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to become educated home buyers.
I'm Veronica and that was Meighan. We are two of Australia's most experienced buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum, which is a good thing because between us, we've got almost 50 years experience to share with you, and together we're going to cut through the BS and make sure that you're well informed so you make better decisions.
Now, when you get to the end of this episode, make sure you check out the website homebuyeracademy.com.au. Take a look at our course for first home buyers.
We've created an easy-to-follow course that builds on all of our professional experience to take you step by step through the whole home buying journey.
You'll know exactly what to do, when to do it, and be able to find your first home faster and easier with our guidance along the way.
It's the next best thing to having your very own buyer's agent.
Now, before we get into the interesting stuff, in this week's episode, there's the boring bit to do, and that's the disclaimer.
You, of course, know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes their time to personally understand your situation. Now, we've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording, but things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority or your trusted advisors, or both, to get the most up-to-date information.
Today we're talking about the tricks a sales agent might use to try and kind of bluff buyers. The inspiration for this episode came from an article we read where one sales agent revealed how he uses this particular tactic to get buyers to increase their offers. So it is a real thing, and we're going to give you some tips to help you see through these games. This is a small part of step 9 in the PACE system. Now remember, PACE stands for preparation, action, commitment and execution. And we have 10 steps within the PACE system that help guide you from start all the way through to being a happy homeowner.
And step 9 is all about negotiating. So that's important, very important part of the process. There's so much that goes into it though, doesn't it? So here's a common scenario. You're finally ready to make an offer. You've agonized about how much to pay. And if you've done our first home buyer course, you will have also done your homework so that you know exactly what the property is worth to you and you know how the agent is going to manage that offer process. But even then, you were not expecting that this sudden other buyer has suddenly emerged and is also suddenly making an offer. The first thing probably goes through your mind is, are they for real? And then you're rethinking, am I about to miss out? And so if you're not on your game, all of your careful planning will fly out the window.
Now, I've got to say, Veronica, up front, there are many markets in Australia at different points in time where there are multiple buyers on a property. So we're not suggesting for a moment that you say to yourself, what a load of rubbish. There isn't another buyer. I'm just going to ignore what this agent says. You really have to be across the market conditions to work out whether this might be a trick or not a trick. It's reality. Because, you know, I don't know how many people I've heard come to us as a buyer's agency in Brisbane and say, oh, I missed out. Well, why did you miss out? Well, the agent said there was another offer and we didn't believe him, so we didn't increase our offer, but we would have paid more. Yeah, oh, that's such a shame. All right, so let's go through this. We're not here to say don't panic, right? We're going to step you through what's really happening, and you can protect yourself from being bluffed, but also dig through maybe a little bit the layer that's sitting on top and work out whether this is real or not.
Yep, absolutely. So the first thing to consider is the psychology behind the other buyer trick, right? And look, let's face it, agents use it because of scarcity and creating the fear of missing out, because they are both very powerful motivators, right? So sometimes, and we've had this happen in our business too, in our buyer's agency business, so the agent talks about another buyer that's made an offer and they haven't really existed, but the fact is that there are other buyers swarming around and he knows that, or she knows that one of them will make an offer. So they sort of almost speak as if the offer has happened, even though the offer hasn't really happened. So that can sometimes happen.
Isn't it the right wording is, I'm expecting another offer to come in.
Oh my God, that
They're
cracks me
always
up.
expecting another offer to come in. And, that's not lying. That's not misleading. They could be expecting it.
I know. I do love it though. And they say, oh, I'm expecting an offer to come in at midday on Wednesday and it's going to be at X dollars. And you go, wow, when I was a selling agent, I would have loved it if every buyer came to me and told me in advance what they were going to do,
going to offer and
how
when
much.
they're going to offer it.
Yeah. So sometimes they use that line though to get you to make the offer in the first place, right? So that's sort of trying to generate. But then, I think it always feels sus when you make the offer that the agent suddenly talks about another buyer, and that other buyer could have been there all along, or it could have been made up, and you don't know. And some agents don't reveal the actions of other buyers. And particularly if you haven't shown yourself to be particularly interested in that property, they would have no reason to tell you that information. So sometimes if you've sort of come out of the blue after playing it really cool and you make an offer and they tell you about another buyer, well, sometimes it's legit purely because they've never had a conversation with me before. But the simple fact is that it is a tactic that a lot of agents use. Earlier we said that the inspiration for this episode comes from an article that was written by an agent, and I was horrified that they bragged about it in a way.
Yeah,
but
it was really interesting. I looked at it, Veronica, and I thought, geez, I don't know. I guess what that agent was trying to do was attract more sellers because he has this unique kind of strategy. But, I don't think it's that unique, and I don't know that it's necessarily put him in good light. But anyway, we digress. We're trying to teach you as buyers, as first-home buyers, how to just dig down a little bit deeper and not get emotionally involved in this kind of conversation.
The simple fact is it's psychology. It might be crudely executed, but it's psychology is what they're playing on. And it is all about getting buyers to act emotionally rather than strategically. If you have that fear of missing out, you're much more likely to knee-jerk and tell them basically you've got more money and give them all sorts of information that they didn't otherwise have. And that is why they do it. And if they think, okay, they've got more money, so they know how to play you.
Yeah, and this is a very similar sales tactic that you might see when you go to an electronics store, a furniture store, where they say, this week the price is here, but next week it's going up to X. And so you have that fear of, if I don't make a really quick decision, I might miss out on a discount and I'm going to have to pay more. So it is actually, every industry has a similar kind of tactic. Usually in furniture stores, there's a recommended retail price and there's a discount that you can ask and there's other stock that you can access. Whereas homes, of course, there's only one that you are interested in, or maybe two. So this is a sales kind of psychological tactic that puts the fear of missing out in the forefront of your decision making. So we're really going to teach you how to put that in another box and continue to act without that emotion. Now, the next thing we want to talk about, Veronica, is the other buyer real or not?
Yeah. And look, sometimes it is genuine competition, as Meighan said earlier. If you're in a hot market, it's quite likely there are other buyers. But you will sort of know that. And I think if you are across what your market is doing, you have a better idea of whether or not that's reasonable or not. When it's quiet, if you've been to open houses and there hasn't been anybody there, and then all of a sudden these buyers come out of nowhere, well, there's a slim chance maybe it is a real buy, but, odds are that probably not. And I think the longer a property has been on the market, particularly if it's been overpriced, again, it's unlikely that there really is another buyer. But if that property is priced to sell and it hasn't been on the market very long, then there's a good chance that there could be other buyers. But I think that lack of transparency in the private treaty sales, it does mean that you rarely know for sure. You have to arm yourself with that other information we're talking about here, and we'll talk more about working out what the property is worth as well. When you're armed with that information, it does allow you to make a better call on whether the other buyer is real or not.
Yeah, and of course, we're talking about private treaty here as opposed to auction. Now, auction, you can see who your competition is. They're out there, and it's why you and I often like to buy at auction if we have the opportunity and if the circumstances are right for our buyers, is because you can see what everyone else is doing. You can see whether they're real. You can see how many other people are bidding at a certain point in time. But with private treaty, it is meant to be a process that is behind closed doors, if you like, and how the agent chooses to deal with that. You've got to ask the right questions to find out what their process is to deal with that private treaty. So lack of transparency is a challenging thing in private treaty, but it doesn't mean that you have to go off your plan, step away from the process that you've put in place or the plans or the limits that you've put in place for yourself. You can still tread your path. Now, how to test if the other buyers exist?
So you can ask very special questions, very specific, I should say, special. They're special and specific. And such as, have they made an offer in writing? What is the price? Now, you may or may not be told the answer to that.
Probably won't, but you must ask it. You've got to have a go.
Has the vendor accepted that offer? Is that offer at a level the vendor will accept? Is a really valid question, because if then they start fudging around it, you go, well, we're not even in cooey of selling this. This is not going to be sold, tomorrow. Are the terms the same as mine? If you've offered a short settlement, for example, and that person's offered 3 months, and then the next question can be, well, what's preferable to the owner? And also watch their response, because vague answers are a red flag. If you get really clear answers, you can be more confident. But if you get lots and lots of waffle and story and it's all very fudgy, then I'm less inclined to think that a buyer really exists.
So, Veronica, what do you do if you're up against another buyer, like legitimately up against another? Like you've worked it out, it really is real.
Well, it sucks, right? Because you much prefer not to be fighting for it.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. But the thing is that you have to stick to your budget, right? You don't suddenly start thinking, okay, well, maybe I'll pay more for this property than you thought about beforehand. One of the things that we teach you to do in the first home buyer course is to be able to price the property and be able to set your limit, right? They're two different things. You do need to be able to work out what a property is worth in the current market. You do need to be across other recent sales and be really confident as to where this property sits. And I'm not talking about wishful thinking. This is about being real about what market value is. So you need to decide in advance on that. You need to do that research, but you also need to decide in advance the maximum you're willing to pay. And that is super important, because for you, a particular property might be so suitable to your needs that you will stretch yourself for that property.
Particularly if it's unique and you haven't seen one for 12 months.
Yeah, if there's 3 others that have sold in the last 3 months that you would have equally gone for, then you're not going to push yourself as hard as if you've been on the market and looked at every single thing for 6 months and this is by far the best you've seen.
Yeah.
You are going to push yourself harder, right? But you do absolutely need to do your own price research beforehand and not just rely on the agent's price guide or the asking price as the anchor point.
Oh, I love that point. Can we just go over what anchor point is, right? So don't use the agent's price guide or the asking price as an anchor point. I think we really, really want to dig into this one.
What Meighan is calling in on there is the fact that a lot of people, except in Queensland where there's no price guides, but there's still an asking price if it's a private treaty, right? Sometimes,
only
not all the
if there
time.
is a price, right? There can't be an offers over, there can't be a price range, there can't be a guide. It is either an asking price or nothing.
Yeah. So a big problem with prices, so price guides or a range in other states or an asking price in Queensland, is that buyers often come at it and think, okay, well, if there's an asking price, then I'm just going to offer 10% less. Or if it's a price
give myself
guide,
a little wiggle room.
Yeah. If it's I have to offer less and 10%. Right? Or if it's a price guide, you think, well, it's going to be more than that, so I'm going to offer 10% more or 20% more or whatever it is you've decided. The problem is that it's not reliable. One agent might have quoted 5% less than really what it should sell for. Another one might have quoted 20% less. And if you go and apply a blanket rule of 5% to everyone, you're going to miss out most of the time. If you apply a blanket rule of 20%, then you're probably going to overpay and you probably buy quick because you'll be paying too much.
Because you pay too much. And I've seen this a lot in online forums, Veronica. I've seen people say the asking price or the price guide is this, how much should I offer? Right? Not one of the responses ever suggests that you look at comparable sales and work out what that property is worth before you make an offer.
Which is insane not to do that.
Absolutely insane, because the agent might have an opinion. The owner might have a different opinion. At the end of the day, the owner's instructions, as long as they are lawful, are the instructions that the agent has to follow. So if the owner asks for a price guide or a price to be put on a property, that's what the agent's got to put on there. So that might be too high, it might be too low, but you've really got to just throw that out. Asking price is irrelevant. Work out what the property is worth using the comparable sales method. And we have a huge part of the course is in the evaluation step, which is about pricing a property. You do that right, and then you don't have to worry about what the asking price is.
And that is step 7, by the way, in the pay system. So here's the thing. You do your work, you do your research, you work out really where that property sits in the current market. And it's evidence-based and it's based on actual sales, not what an agent says or doesn't say or whatever, right?
Or a forum.
And then you have to work out, okay, what's it worth to you? And the thing is, though, and what we do teach you in step-by-step through the process is to be able to do that before you start negotiating. Now, if there is another buyer right? Even if there isn't another buyer, that information is your protection against overpaying or missing out, right? Because if you have priced it and you understand what's going on in the market and that agent comes back to you at a price that's well over what you think it's worth and it's outside of that little bit of elasticity that you give yourself because you really, really, really want this one, you can just say no because there will be another opportunity that comes up that's more reasonably priced if you've done this research. Where people go wrong is it's not worth that, but they don't actually do the research. They just think because it feels crazy to them that therefore people are paying too much. But then if people keep paying too much, then somebody's got to be wrong. You know, if the one person is not buying is the only person saying everybody's paying too much, then usually that person is the wrong person. So it's important that you do have a really solid grounding in reality. So if you are up against another buyer, you take the focus off the other buyer and you focus on what is this property worth? What is it worth to me? Am I prepared to pay more than that or not? If I am, I will increase my offer. If I'm not, I will bow out. And I know it sounds like we're making it sound super simple, but it is actually that simple. It's still emotional. It's still going to hurt.
It's still emotional. This is where the head comes in, where you've made these decisions based on data. So the heart tells you whether you want this property or not. It's part of the analysis and the evaluation. But in terms of setting your price, the heart has a small part to pay, and that is the premium that you're prepared to pay to secure the property. And one thing that we always say to our buyers, if we are in a multiple offer situation or going into an auction, is what is the price at which you would lose this property? And don't ever die wondering. Make sure you've put that on the table, that you haven't gone, yeah, I'm not going to pay anymore just because you don't want the agent to pressure you. If you're going to miss out on a property, make sure you've missed out on it because you were not prepared to pay more, not because you didn't want to feel pressured to pay more. Like two really different things.
And that's important too, because, you know, this is why we really strongly encourage and teach our students to set this limit before they get into the negotiation, because that's the time when you don't want to be under pressure to make these quick decisions. You want to have made them in advance. And it does make this whole negotiating process a lot smoother. And I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here.
It makes it easier to walk away, Veronica. Honestly, it makes it easier to walk away with confidence when you've hit that and you go, no, I am totally comfortable.
That's right. Because if you do miss out, especially when you've done it all right, another opportunity will come, right? Persistence will pay off as long as you're doing it all in the right order. But of course, the big thing is we don't like being manipulated, as we've just been talking about. People who dig their heels and say, I'm not putting another offer because I don't like being pressured. So how do we avoid being manipulated?
Well, I think importantly, you don't want to show desperation. You want to show interest, right? There's plenty of people out there who will tell you, keep your cards close to your chest. Don't tell the agent what you're thinking. Well, how the hell is the agent meant to know if you're interested if you don't tell them that you're interested? They'll sell it to somebody else and you won't even get the opportunity. So whilst you don't want to show desperation, you want to keep a bit of a poker face. Buy time. Slow down the process. Say, well, maybe that was a bit more than I was considering. Let me talk to my partner and I'll come back to you. What is your deadline for presenting offers to the owner? What is your process going to be if you've got multiple buyers making offers? Every agent will have a different way of handling multiple offers. It's incredibly important to understand what that is, because if their deadline, if the owner has said to them, I don't want to see anything until Wednesday and it's only Sunday, you've got a bit of time to really work through it. But if, as we've seen sometimes in Brisbane in recent times, it might be that you've seen it on Saturday morning and you've got until 5 o'clock Saturday afternoon. You've got to do a lot of work and be ready to make a substantial decision in a very short period of time. So you want to know what the process is. And we always talk about understanding and asking the agent what their process is.
It's really important to stay calm. You want to buy on your terms, not theirs. However, it's not always possible, right? Sometimes they won't be calling you bluff, as we've said. So digging your heels in and trying to play a power card, that won't necessarily work either. We're working through, okay, asking these good questions, taking it one step at a time, relying on your research, but also recognizing sometimes you're not in the powerful seat. And so a decision has to be made. Do I want to buy this property again? And how far am I going to go? And following that. But you can also consider using a buyer's agent or a trusted advisor.
Just wondering who else you would put in that position, Veronica. I'd say that a buyer's agent would be your only advisor that you want to have in that position.
Exactly. Unless you've got someone very close to you who knows a lot about real estate and negotiating real estate, don't be going for a trusted advisor who, like your mortgage broker, who says, I'll help you. which not a good idea. Don't go with your dad who loves...
Because they're a mortgage broker and their lane is mortgage broking, not negotiating.
We always got to remember that property advice is unregulated and too many people have an opinion and give it freely. So do consider using a buyer's agent perhaps to help buffer against pressure. And you can use your broker as a sounding board, but don't get them to do it for you. But if you are going to hire someone to do the negotiation for you, like a buyer's agent, make sure you engage them before you make your first offer. I mean, how many people come to you, Meighan, having already made the offer? They're in the shit, basically, because they don't know what to do next, or they don't believe that there's another buyer. They don't know what to do. And it's too late. You've got to have a process. You've got to have a structure. You've got to have a strategy. And this is what we teach you how to do that. But too many people shoot themselves in the foot and then they want help.
Yeah, usually too much information has been divulged at that particular point in time, and there's not an ability to craft an effective negotiation strategy. So as buyer's agents, we have a whole toolkit of negotiation strategies and tactics that we use. But in order to employ those negotiation tactics, we have to have gathered a lot of information along the way. Like every piece of information we're gathering along the way forms part of the negotiation. So if we haven't got the ability to do that, or too much has been revealed, we're not actually able to craft a really good negotiation strategy. So it's very important to make a decision before you actually put that offer out there as to whether you're going to do it yourself and run it all the way through. If a buyer's agent comes in at that time, I would question their worth and how effective they're going to be to help you, because there might be some unraveling to do and that could get a little bit tricky and a little bit sticky. So make the decision well before you make the offer, and then let the buyer's agent gather that information and put you in a position of strength in the negotiation.
It is important to understand the game. So whether you hire someone to do it for you who understands the game, and make sure, honestly, a lot of people doing our course would know more than a lot of buyer's agents out there these days, which is very sad. So don't just assume a buyer's agent is going to solve your problem anyway. Seriously, if you learn to do this properly, you can do better than a lot of them. But if you think about it, sales agents are trained negotiators, right? Often the buyer is at a disadvantage, even the buyer's agent to a degree. And I will say to a degree only because agents know more about everything to do with that sale than the buyer's agent or the buyer does. Experienced buyer's agents, we spend our time gathering information so we know almost as much as the agent, and we can pretty much fill in the gaps because we're so experienced. But a buyer is going to be at a disadvantage, right? Also, the thing is with sales agents, they practice dialogue day in, day out. Everything they say to you is practiced, right? It's designed to get reactions out of you. And if you have not been doing this for a living, you won't have heard these lines, and you will take them at face value more often than you should. Right? We hear them and we keep a little black book, if you like, of new bits of dialogue we hear because they're coming up with new stuff all the time.
Yes.
You know, you go, wow, I haven't heard that one before. So just check with the team and see, anyone else heard this one? Yeah, so-and-so said that. And, you know, and so we work at our best responses. So we do have to understand and recognize that when you're negotiating with agents, they're going to use these tools and tricks, and they are going to potentially manufacture a buyer to bluff you. They may or may not. You've got to understand that that is part of the game and it might happen, and to be aware of it, really.
Yeah. Remember principle number 1, Home Buyer Academy principle number 1, the agent works for the seller and their job is to get the highest price.
Yep. So knowing their tactics, like the magical other buyer that mysteriously just suddenly appears, it just helps you stay in control. You don't have to get mad about it. Just recognize what it is, you know.
It is what it is, and use it. You can use that information in your favour, and when we often do, you know, because the other buyer sometimes they say, fabulous, let us know when you've got that on paper and you're ready to present it to the owner. And we said earlier, you know, ask questions like, is it actually a written offer or is it verbal? I'm not prepared to put a written offer in front of an agent with a threat of another buyer unless I have confirmation, written confirmation they have a written offer. So there's ways to sort of go about confirming these types of things. These are the kinds of strategies that we teach you in the first home buyer course, and it helps you level the playing field, right? You're not going to have the kind of depth of experience that Veronica and I have, but when you come to Campfire, when you come along and you bring a property and we're talking through a negotiation, these are the things that we can help fill the gaps for you so that you are very effective in your negotiations.
Absolutely. In fact, we had one today. We were talking to one of our students who's got a property, it's off market, and she was saying that the agent potentially was going to try and do a boardroom auction. So obviously we're talking about Melbourne here, and it's like, well, we've got to establish exactly what the rules are before we go down this path, right? Because otherwise you can get in a world of pain because you can make an offer and you think, hang on, what's happening? I'm actually out of control. I've got no idea.
What's going to happen in this boardroom? Who's going to be there? How's it going to run?
But are they even going to do it? So it's really about just asking the right questions to get super clear. Another good question is, what will buy it? So they've got a price range. That's great. What will buy it? Tell me. Now, they may not answer you, but you're going to get intel.
Yes. And if you keep asking the question, you'll get all sorts of different answers that might help you form an idea. All right. So, Veronica, let's have a look at when the other buyer is actually good news.
It seems weird, but when there's nobody else interested in the property, and this is actually one of the reasons that agents do it too, right? Because they're trying to create social proof. So they're trying to say, it's all right, you're not the only one that's interested in this. Other people are interested in it as well, right? Because none of us really wants to go out there and be the only person interested in a property, right?
Which ironically is the best position to be in to negotiate, right? It's counterintuitive, but it is so true.
Isn't it? And so if there's genuine competition, it can actually validate that the property is desirable. And we're always saying you need to buy with your future buyer in mind. And so that's usually comforting. And we always say, remember, there's one of our other home buying principles is if the property is easy to buy, then it could be difficult to sell. So if it's difficult to buy because other people are interested in it, then that can be a good thing.
And that's something not to shy away from. But on the flip side, if there is an opportunity to buy without competition from other buyers, back yourself. Back yourself. Believe in your assessment process, believe in your due diligence, and believe in your pricing process, and go for it.
Because the fact is, yes, there is work to be done. And if you do that, sometimes there is great little opportunities, a window of opportunity where no one has actually seen it. But I have to say that the one thing that we're talking about here is a lack of transparency, which is something that earlier you mentioned, Meighan, that we quite like buying at auction at times. Not always. There are times when pre-auction is the way to go as well. You've got to be strategic about this. But the thing is that when you're at auction, I can look around me and I can see what those other people have bid, and we can then respond, bid against them, or walk away depending on what our pre-auction instructions are. And we do the same process before we start an auction, right? We help our client set that limit, that walk away price. We don't go trying to work that out during the auction, which is a huge mistake that buyers make. So private sales, however, private treaty sales are not transparent, which is what we're all talking about here. And that is one of the difficulties. People say they like to avoid auction, and then they find themselves in one of these private treaty negotiations where the agent's saying there's another buyer. That is way worse than being at auction.
It is harder. But I just want to go back to the point I was kind of going down the path of earlier, and it's that social proof. Often people don't want to make an offer if there aren't other offers. And it is just...
it's infuriating.
It's just infuriating because there is no better way to negotiate than without another buyer, as long as you know that property is right. And there's no issue with other people or conditions or settlement terms. It's just a genuine conversation between an owner and a buyer with an agent in the middle. And you can help that conversation by asking the right questions and giving the right information to the agent.
So a few final tips. Don't rush just because you're told to. Look, there are times when you will need to, but again, it's asking the right questions, right? Always get all of your ducks lined up before you make the offer, right? So we teach you that process, everything that needs to happen before you make the offer to get you ready to make an offer and increase your chances of success, right? You have to do the pre-work.
Yep. Get your ducks lined up. Get the offer ready to go. Understand your parameters. Have all the right questions, all the right answers from the agent. And if you want to learn how to handle every trick in the book, you'll find a full module on negotiation inside the First Home Buyer course.
So, look, agents will keep using this magical other buyer line because it works, but you don't have to fall for it. So this episode has been all about giving you discernment to try to work out, is it true or not? How can we ask better questions? You need to equip yourself with the right knowledge, and you will buy smart, not scared.
That's a good one. Too many first-home buyers are leaving money on the table and hurting their future selves because they don't know how to do things in the right order. That's what we do. We teach you the exact steps you need to take and support you along the way.
We help you move from a state of information overload to feeling excited and in control. You'll learn a clear step-by-step process that takes the guesswork out of buying your first home. You'll know exactly what to look for, who to talk to, and how to navigate every stage with confidence, avoiding costly rookie mistakes along the way.
We've created Your First Home Buyer course, a 10-module self-paced course plus online mentoring. Now, the course only costs $990 and you get direct access to us every week. You can share the link of any property you're thinking of buying and we can help you work out whether it's an A, B or C grade or a no-go zone. We even help guide you through your negotiations.
Trust us, you will buy a hell of a lot better with our guidance and you'll overpay a lot more than the cost of the course if you don't know what you're doing.
Thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to join our Facebook group. It's called Your First Home Buyer Guide Australia, and it's your opportunity to connect with us and ask us your questions, which we will answer. Meaning you can make sure that you're not getting led down the garden path. We hope to see you there soon.